Hey there, everyone. I'm Sonya Maroney, joined by my lovely co-host and better half, Jen Cameron. Welcome to our passion project and pseudo side hustle, where we ask the burning questions from some of the most fascinating leaders who are leveraging technology across the hospitality space. Good morning, Jen. We are excited about our guest today.
We sure are. Good morning, Sonia. So this morning I have the pleasure of introducing Stratis Morfogen. Stratis, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you for having me. Good morning.
Great. So on Be Our Guest, Sonia and I love to start out with a little bit of an icebreaker. So the first question that we have for you this morning is, if you had the ability to have a billboard with anything or anywhere on it, what would it be and why?
Disrupt everything.
Love it.
And why? Because I just wrote the
Yeah,
book.
exactly.
Right.
I know.
Well, yep, there it is.
I
There it
didn't
is.
bring my shameless plug, but you did it.
Exactly.
Well, we're going to have to try on working on getting that billboard up for you, Stratis. But, as we kick things off, what would you like our listeners to know about you and your background?
Well, I'm a third generation restaurateur.
Mhm.
From the age of 6, like I've written in my book, I realized that I was basically never looking at something as the status quo and always dissecting things and deconstructing things and always doing it my way. That wasn't a good formula for school because I was probably at the bottom of my class because I was always asking teachers questions with questions. And every time they would ask a question, I'd hit them back with another question. And they're like, this is not how it goes.
Yeah.
I ask a question, you give me an answer. I said, that's in your world. You asked me a question, and that's not the right question. And so that was my attitude growing up. And, my Greek father would say I was just completely stubborn. And, through the years, there came a term for this. And it was, I disrupt everything that I do. And, when you do things like that, you do have a propensity for failure. Failure is definitely going to be at a higher level because what you're doing is something outside the comfort zone. When I did a Greek diner with my father in 1990, um, I said, I'm bringing a 3-star New York Times chef in. I'm not going to just do eggs and sandwiches and blah, blah, blah. It's so boring for me. And with my ADHD in full bloom, I'm not interested in doing something status quo. So with that said, I give him credit. He let me do it. And it was probably the only Greek diner in the world that had needed reservations only on Friday and Saturday because, I said, why not? Why can't you do it? And with that said, I did that with everything I did. And my father used to call me stubborn. And no, it's like I just disrupted everything I've done since the age of 6. And I've probably owned about 35 restaurants, fine dining. And, currently, we have contracts for over 400 Brooklyn Dumpling shops franchised around the world. And after this, I leave for Walmart with Patti LaBelle. Leave for Arkansas with Patti LaBelle. And we have a big Walmart deal that we're doing. So it's been fun. Inside my 35-year career, I've created such amazing relationships like Miss LaBelle, and everything's coming to roost now, and it's pretty cool. And I tell my children that it doesn't matter, how well you do in school, do your best, but always create, build bridges with people, build bridges with people, and you're going to see in later in life how useful it is. And so again, if you ever seen the movie My Big Fat Greek Wedding, that was my biography. That was written about my just joking. But that was really about my life. My dad had Windex in a holster, and he would walk around the whole restaurant with a holster of Windex. And, we lived in an old, wasp town of Garden City where everybody's name was Muffy and Biff. But there was my family with 300 people at a 10-year-old birthday party. And they had the lamb and all the smoke going past the neighborhood yards, and the Greek flag on an old 300-year-old colonial, 200-year-old colonial. So it was pretty funny. That movie was basically my upbringing, and and I'm very proud of it. But it has its ups and downs, like like anything else. And my father taught me what he did, and I kind of outgrew it around the age of 20, and I went off on my own since then.
No, I love that movie, Stratis, and I also relate to that. My parents are Italian immigrants and very similar philosophies there. And yet you definitely stay busy. You wear many hats. You're the executive managing director of Brooklyn Chop House, the founder of Brooklyn Dumpling Shop, an entrepreneur, an author, but you're also a son, a husband, a father, and a philanthropist. Which do you identify with the most and why?
Well, when COVID hit in 2020, it was devastating to us. But, at that point, I said, what do we do here? Just sit here and, complain and complain and talk about these socialist leaders that are not following the science. So quickly, I decided, you know what? I want to tell my grandkids one day, hopefully sitting on a beach when I'm 90 years old, if I get there. And I want to tell them what I did during COVID. And, there will be capitalist, things that I did. But the most proud thing that I've ever did was we fed over 8,400 healthcare heroes in 19 hospitals and 3 police departments from March 2020 to July 2020. And I did it by, I really don't believe charity and philanthropy should be like promoted or exposed. But what was cool about it is we started just sending meals to New York Presbyterian, which was next to Brooklyn Chop House. And they just started posting stuff on Instagram with a hashtag Brooklyn Chop House Thank You. And they would have like 20 doctors, nurses, janitorial staff holding up this huge banner of everybody holding a letter. And I was like, wow, that's like that really turned around our morale and helped us, like all of a sudden my staff had smiles on their faces. And with that said, New York Post got hold of it and they said, hey, they called us Hero of the Day. And that was March 27, 2020. That's how early we had started this. We started this like March 5th. And what was great about that, promotion, which I was kind of cringing when I knew that was coming out. I don't like being called Hero of the Day when these poor people are janitorial staff are changing the beds of dead COVID patients and going home to their families. Geez, I'm not a hero. I'm just feeding them because that's what we should do. And with that said, Cisco and all the big food companies started calling me and saying, hey, we read this in the paper. We want to be a part of this. And between Cisco and Junior's Cheesecake, Voss Water, 4 or 5 Coffee, we literally got about a couple of $100,000 in donations. And then we built it from 1 hospital to 19 hospitals. And that's probably the most fulfilling part of the last 2.5 years of taking something so rotten and so bad across the board. And I'll have a feel-good story about it for the generations to come. And that's why I wrote about it in my book, because that book is for future Morfogen generations. It's my story to them because I won't be around to tell it. So that's my story to them.
That's great. Yeah, and it's interesting. You're disrupting kind of the philanthropic space as well, right? And the other thing that kind of resonated is,
my father called it stubborn, and I guess the word is disruption, but because that's how I've been all my life. It's just so boring to me to look at something and just do it the conventional way. And again, but you have to take the ratio of failure is going to be far greater. But when you do hit it, it's so fulfilling financially, emotionally, across the board. It's like a feeling like no other, because you've just created something. You've just created your own lane, which is the most important term. You created your own lane, and that lane could easily be like discarded, squashed, confuse the customer. When I created Brooklyn Chop House, it was the marriage of Chinese and an American steakhouse. It wasn't a Chinese steakhouse. It was basically for the people. Every time I would go to a great steakhouse, like a Peter Luger, anyone that didn't eat beef felt like a stepchild. Anyone that didn't eat meat, it would be like fish with a piece of parsley, lobster in a towel, cream of spinach, baked potato, and maybe a shrimp cocktail. While where everybody else is feasting on beautiful porterhouse steaks, I found that there was an industry that needed to be disrupted. And that's why I said, well, I owned Philippe Chow for 15 years, sold it in 2014. I said, you know what? Wouldn't it be cool to create a culinary version of LSD? Everybody's like, LSD? What the hell is, what are you promoting, drugs? Yeah, it's a culinary drug, because to me, LSD and the perfect porterhouse and the perfect surf and turf, the perfect steakhouse to me is where the side dishes are just as good as the main star, and the main star being the dry aged porterhouse or the dry aged beef. So with that said, I said, let's take the chow dishes like, salt and pepper lobster, ginger garlic lobster, Beijing chicken, Peking duck. Marry that with the dry aged steak, and we called it lobster steak and duck and dumplings. And we hashed LSD so many times. I got a letter from the FBI that I'm under investigation for the promotion. So that's when I reached marketing legendhood, is when I'm being investigated for drugs because I'm promoting lobster steak and duck. So my answer to the FBI was, I sent an emoji of a lobster steak and a duck and this. And that was my answer. There's your LSD. But the cool thing about that is that it got hashtag 4,000 times in a year. And hashtag LSD to today has been removed from Instagram because of it.
Wow.
Wow, that's fascinating. That's great. I was gonna mention the whole FBI thing. I heard you say that in a podcast and thought that was pretty funny.
Yeah.
So at which point, and you mentioned this in the book, but at which point in your life did you figure out that you had disrupted everything in your life?
6 years old.
There you go.
I just didn't get along with kids my age. It's funny now that like kids that I grew up with from like kindergarten to 12, now they're reading my book and they're like, shit, I didn't even know that was going on. Wow. I saw them at my reunion recently. Like, I read your book. Wow. I had no idea that that's what was going on when I would see you in 6th grade and 9th grade and 10th grade. And, by 6th grade, I knew every head of every mafia family in the country. They were extended uncles to me. I didn't think anything wrong with that. So, it was quite funny how my world was so out of touch with those kids. And it came to play one day when my father got called into school and I think I was 10 years old. And they said, we think Stratis has learning disabilities. And I think he's not getting the best use out of the school. And my father's sitting there like an old Greek, almost like Tony Soprano-esque, looking and going, yeah, he fidgets. I saw that in the movie once at Sopranos. And I thought, oh my God, it's my father. He fidgets? Really? He's no interest in what and he listened to the whole thing. Stratis does this, Stratis does that. He doesn't do his homework on time. He always asks us questions when we ask him a question. He refuses to give us an answer, and blah, 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 blah. So on and on and on. So my father listens and he says, well, I have a question for you. Maybe you're not teaching him something maybe you're teaching him things that he's not interested in. And they're like, oh, like shocked. And he goes, let's play this out. This with a heavy Greek accent. I can actually do it. It's pretty funny. Listen to me. This Friday night at my restaurant in Bellerose, Queens, you bring your significant other. I don't care if you're gay, straight. I don't care. Bring all your family. I hold a table for 10 for all of you. And you're going to watch this kid. That's enough of my accent. You're going to watch this kid work a 200-seat restaurant at 10 years old as a busboy. I'd make him a manager if I could, but there's laws to that. Running this restaurant, teaching the bussers how to bus, teaching the waiters how to serve, teaching the bartenders how to hold a glass, teaching the host how to host, teaching the managers how to manage, and watching him, and people won't even order until he gets to their table. Watching him run a floor. And then you're going to tell me that night after you watch this, and you tell me if he's got learning disabilities while all his little friends are have their chocolate milk and watching cartoons at midnight, and he's working his ass off until 2 a.m. on a Friday and Saturday night. And you tell me if he's got learning disabilities, because that's the problem with education. You guys already built the judgment about what education should be. And you've already built the judgment that if you don't make it inside of this little bubble that you've created, living someone else's dream. That's what education is today, all the way up to Wharton. You're living somebody else's dream. That's education. They don't teach you to be an entrepreneur. No. And then you tell me, and the truth is 8 people did come that Friday night. And you know what? Everything was great until I got to middle school and we had to redo it again. And then I had to redo it again because, I was just barely charming my teachers just so they didn't put me in summer schools and just to barely pass. And I finished my high school in 11th year. I didn't even go to my 12th year. Don't believe me, I was 363 out of 365. I didn't do it because of high grades. I just doubled up my classes and I got out. Because to me, I was wasting my time in school. And hell no, going to college.
Yeah, I think it's an incredibly important message. And what it would be like if we had a college or maybe even a high school for entrepreneurship, right? What a different world we would probably live in.
We're the only industry that promotes $150,000 in student debt, but we don't have $25,000 for a startup. I mean, when you look at these things, you understand why these things happen. because, we have politicians that make these rules, and these politicians really never ran any kind of a lemonade stand. They've never created a job in the private sector. They've never had sleepless nights. And when you have that combination, it's a combination it's a recipe of failure. And we keep on repeating it. So you know what they say about repeating the same thing over and over and expecting different results.
Mm-hmm.
As we are a day after the election day.
So I'm asking for a friend here, but so what would you say to somebody who knows that they're kind of a disruptor in their heart of hearts or in their soul, but is a little nervous about disrupting the status quo? What advice would you give them?
Well, the only thing that I would be nervous about is the possibility of failure. And you know what? Again, we teach people to be shame. We teach people going through this journey of entrepreneurship that failure, you should be ashamed of failure. I actually say failure is part of the journey. The only way to success is through failure. And if you don't fail, you really haven't pushed yourself enough. My daughter just graduated, and I teach about 4 universities now, which is pretty funny. I just got even asked to speak at Yale. Wish my father was around to see that, because his dream for me was to go to Cornell. And yeah, with my 67 average, that wasn't going to happen. So anyway, so what we teach everyone, and it happens now, it's like so loud on social media when someone fails or closes a restaurant. I mean, not the last 2 years, but somebody fails. Oh, this guy robbed me. This guy lost my money. Oh, this guy's a failure. This guy's a this. You can fail with integrity. If you've got a business and you've taken investor money and you're struggling, just make sure you're not driving private jets. Just make sure you're not, you make sure you're being very frugal with, and being very protective over the investment. And if you fail, it's okay, but as long as you do it with integrity. And so the same thing with disruption, like I said in the previous question, your failure rate will go higher, but there's nothing shameful about failure. I mean, I think that's the only journey to success is through failure. And I literally had my last, I think it was Lehigh University, I did or SMU, or one of them, whatever it was. A girl says, listen, my parents just spent $250,000 on my education. I'm 22 years old. I don't know what I want to do. I'm getting so much pressure from my family and my teachers and my counselors that I need to know what I want to do so I can get a job in my 20s and retire in my 60s. I was like, that's what they taught you in the school? I said, you need to go back to them and tell them that is the worst information and inaccurate information they could ever tell you. And she's like, what do you mean? I said, that was written in 1900 when the life expectancy was like 60 years old. I go, here's the new rule of thumb. Fuck it up. Can I curse in this?
Yeah.
Fuck up in your 20s. You should have saw the professor's faces when I was saying this. Fuck up in your 20s. Try 10 different things. Like I tell my 23-year-old today, she's working with me, but I said, you might not like it. There's no pressure. Try 10 different things in your 20s. Find what you're passionate about. Then stick to that passion. Fix it and start building in your 30s. Start making money in your 40s. And then retire in your 80s, because life expectancy is 84 today. It's not 60. And I know too many people that retired in the 60s and are broke. They're close to 90 and they're broke. So these lessons, again, it makes no sense to me. It's like they have one set of like messages to students, and it hasn't changed since 1900.
Yeah, I mean, so Stratis, Jen and I really enjoyed the first chapter of your book, Be a Disruptor. You mentioned the advantages of thinking differently and tackling problems from a new perspective, but then you quickly follow that by saying you have to understand that an effective disruptor has to gain a full understanding of the world they intend to disrupt first before doing so. So we'd love to help us understand a little bit more about what you mean by that.
Well, and I think it goes further to say like a jazz musician.
Mm-hmm.
A jazz musician can't Cole Porter or Dizzy Gillespie didn't just come out and change the game. They learned their instruments first. Mm-hmm. They learned their easiest little patterns when they were first learning their instrument. So you need to learn your instrument first. I don't care what it is. You want to open a plant shop or a stationery shop or an insurance company, whatever it is, you have to know your instrument. And I knew my instrument because my father taught me the right way, to a point where I remember when I was 6 or 7 and I was peeling shrimp and garlic till my nails were hurting. I go, Dad, can I stop? And he's like, you want that stereo? I said, yeah, I want the stereo. You got 5 more hours. Like that's how I was brought up. And it wasn't child abuse, or it wasn't like tough love. It was, this is the real world. If you want it, you got to work for it. And my father was pretty well off, but no, it didn't matter. That was his money. It wasn't my money. He said, "You love this business, right?" I said, "I love this business. This is what I'm going to do." Like, well, you can't read this stuff out of a book. You're going to have done it yourself to teach someone in the future on how to do it. And he was always okay with theory, but he knew that practical knowledge and experience and street smarts. If you don't have that, your theory means nothing. And I strongly believe that theory alone will not, and a metro car will get you on the subway. It doesn't do anything for you. And that's really my message. Unfortunately, we teach people to live someone else's dream in education. We teach people that, you go get a job. And that's what's so frustrating. I don't want to learn calculus and physics. I want to learn general math, and I'll take a couple of economic classes just because I'm going to use it. But I don't want to learn about these things because it applies to my world in a big zero.
And also shifting gears a bit to QSRs, you referred to the restaurant industry as being the wild, wild west. What have you identified as the biggest challenges facing QSRs today?
Well, again, you're taking people out of their comfort level. I do a lot of conferences now, and I enjoy speaking to people because I like the abuse. Like, literally, you'll have people say to me, "Look at this yuppie asshole stealing jobs," is what some guy just said at the Mertech conference in Vegas. And then the moderator came and said, "Hey, no profanity." I said, No. Let him continue. And then, first of all, I love this guy. He just called me a yuppie. I'm 54 years old. Perfect. I'm a yuppie. You know what? The best thing you've ever said. I appreciate you more than you know. No, let him talk, because out of the 1,600 people, there's probably 100 that agree with this guy. And I said, this guy must have been the one out on the Long Island Expressway jumping up with a picket sign when the toll booths were removed and all those people lost their jobs. But for the last 3 years, he's been going through the toll booth crossings of bridges and tunnels at 30 miles an hour by getting his license plate scanned or his Easy Pass scanned. And I don't think he cares too much about those jobs that were lost. So, it's that same mentality. They're afraid to go out of their comfort level, and they're afraid for change. They're afraid to adapt. And usually those are the ones that are going to get hurt. And, to me, I would never, I look at a cashier the same way I look at an umpire behind home plate at a baseball game. Tennis got it right. There's no reason for an umpire behind home plate. They get it wrong 35% of the time. Where's the sense in that? Use technology and there would be no John McEnroe today with the way tennis is. What's he going to do? Fight with the computer that it hit the line and start screaming and throwing his racket in the air? No. It's use technology and get it right. And that's what I feel about QSR. QSR has to get it right by getting rid of these cashiers, getting rid of all the logistical staff, because you really knock out a bunch of buckets. One bucket is 7 out of 10 restaurants fail within 30 months because they can't meet payroll or undercapitalization or high rent. I think the latter two don't matter. If we, with technology, can reduce our payroll in half, I believe 7 out of 10 will not just survive, they'll thrive. I really strongly believe that, and now I have the data to prove it, because I have open restaurants right now at 18% payroll. And everybody said that would be mathematically impossible to run a restaurant under 25%. We're at 18, and I'm trying to get it to 15. I know to get to 15 because when one franchisee has 5 restaurants, they can amortize one management salary to 5 stores. And that's how you get to 15. But that's the problem with QSR and most of hospitality. We've always been late to embrace technology. And the QSR with the automats and all that, that's the sexy stuff. Behind the scenes, the inventory management and the payroll and HR and all that, everything should be outsourced. You should not have those people employed. Get rid of those staff. You don't need it. And at the end of the day, if you can keep those 7 restaurants that have historically failed out of 10, and this is what the guy said who called me the asshole. He's like, well, I said, sir, this is how I started it up. I said, I'm saving jobs. He's like, what are you smoking? It was a really fun conversation because he was really abusive, but I loved it. He goes, what are you smoking? I've read about you in an interview where you said that it takes 11 employees to run your dumpling shop without technology. With technology, you need 3.5 to 4. I said, do the math. I'm saving jobs. And then he looks around to everybody. I told you this guy's nuts. And I said, well, let me explain how I am. maybe you need to be versed now. And I said, you know what? You've been standing up long enough. This is where I turn around. I said, sit down now, and I'm going to talk. And then people were like, the fun was over. I said, 7 out of 10 restaurants fail. Let's do your math. Let's do 11 employees. That's 77 jobs lost when those 7 out of 10 fail. Really? I'm trying to keep them open. And if I could keep them open with 4 jobs and 28 jobs, well, guess what? 28 jobs have been saved. Keep restaurants open, keep businesses open by limiting your payroll. More people will save jobs, and more importantly, you'll save an industry. Now, here's a mathematical fact that most people don't know. It's restaurant institutions like 10 years ago. For every hospitality job lost, there's 10 non-hospitality jobs lost. So you add, let's take his numbers or my numbers. Let's just say 50 employees lost their job. Now times that by 10, it's 500. Remember the vendors the vendor truck drivers, the person who's at one of your vendor sites. There's a lot of production behind a restaurant that are not on your payroll, but that get directly affected. I'm not going to just say, oh, the guy who shines your shoes or cuts your hair. No, the vendors lay off everybody when restaurants go out of business. And those vendors have a whole infrastructure of people that support that business. You put that all together, I'm not just saving jobs. I'm not just saving this entrepreneur. I'm saving an industry if you follow the path to technology.
Absolutely. Well, and that kind of leads me to, you built your career on having successful fine dining restaurants and concepts, most notably the Brooklyn Chop House. So what inspired or yet possessed you to open a concept like Brooklyn Dumpling House?
So Brooklyn Chop House was, the combination of Chinese, like I explained it before, Chinese and American steakhouse. But when it got down to the appetizers, I said, let's not stop there with just LSD. Let's do a bacon cheeseburger and a French onion soup. And my partners are like, okay, you find that in any chop house. Nah, bacon cheeseburger, shumai, French onion soup, French onion soup dumpling. Done zao bang, done traditionally Chinese, but inside it's Gruyere cheese, Swiss, beef broth, and caramelized onions, like a real French onion soup, but it's in a dumpling. And I said, let's do bacon cheeseburger. Let's do the lamb yudo with tzatziki. Let's do the Reuben with Russian dressing. Let's do pastrami with hot mustard. Let's keep going on and on and on. Let's do the Philly cheesesteak. But this became the house of the 2-ounce sandwiches. And talking to my Chinese chef Mai, who's been with me for 15 years, the hardest part of all this was not the execution of the menu, was trying to explain it to him that we're doing a pastrami dumpling as he's sharpening his knives, looking at me like I'm nuts. Pastrami in a dumpling? It's not what the Chinese do. I said, then go work in another place that does your traditional. We're disrupting this whole market. We are going to tear this place down because, it was interesting. Fast forward, the CEO of Del Frisco said after he experienced the Brooklyn Chop House menu, and he said, wow, that menu is not fair. And he said it in a loving way. His name was Norman. I said, Norman, what do you mean it's not fair? He goes, my clientele are dying off. The fathers and grandfathers, that are in their 70s and 80s, their kids are not coming. Their grandkids are not coming and spending a 3-hour meal and buying a $400 bottle of wine. That clientele is gone. But when I see Philly cheesesteak spring rolls and French onion soup dumplings and pastrami and all these different types of meats in a dumpling, wow, I could see that could appeal to that generation of X, Y, and X and Z. And then literally 2 days later, Del Frisco had, half of my dumplings, they had Philly cheesesteak spring roll and a pastrami, whatever. But that was a great compliment. That all of a sudden you're talking about an old-time institution that's really run well, saying that they're losing their market share, not because they did anything wrong, they haven't adapted. So came down to this. When I asked my Chinese chefs, when you think of chop house, what do you think of? They said everything but lamb or pork. They said basically chop suey, chop sticks, chopper, hack pork, chop pork. I'm like, really? I think of a lamb chop, pork chop, mutton chop, and cream of spinach. And he's like, what? No, chop house is this. And I was like, wow, we're onto something here. Because my dad owned the 6 Chelsea chop houses. That's his font from 1956, which I've used for chop house and dumpling shop. And it's brought me an incredible amount of good luck. But so there I was basically taking the chop house, chop house model, which was brought here by the Irish in the 1850s, just over there. That's Brooklyn.
Mm.
And it was more of a tribute to them. But I knew that that menu hasn't been changed for 150 years. And I knew it was just, God, it was ripe to be disrupted and ripped apart, deconstructed, and brought back in a new way. And at the end of the day, I always say, men lie, women lie, but numbers don't lie. And we've tripled our projections.
Great. Well, and one of the questions I had for you is you have all these great ideas, right? So what does your process look like taking an idea and actually executing it and opening a restaurant?
At what age? At what age? I mean, at what age? Right now?
Yeah, now.
I have my kids. I'm trying to beg my kids to take over my TikTok accounts. You know, they're 14 and 16 because you know what? They know it better than I do. So to me, it's always about adapt. I mean, there's a 15-year-old kid doing the social media for the Empire State Building. You know, nobody even knows that, but that kid has gotten like 2-3 million views on the first videos she put up of the Empire State Building on TikTok. Someone there thinking, what am I going to do? Hire a 40-year veteran? No, I want to hire the 15-year-olds that live and breathe. You know, again, when I and answer the last part of your question before is like, so when I created Brooklyn Dumpling Shop, I really created a restaurant to speak to the TikTok generation. I created a restaurant where they would, you know, the restaurant would speak to their phone. Remember, they're glued to their phone. And why not create a restaurant that speaks to them? That you know, why not allow them to do it on their time, pick up at their time, pay for it at their time, come and have it ready for them in a heated locker where they scan their phone, take their food and go. And you know, it's funny. So when the 35 and overs go to Brooklyn Dumpling Shop, they're like, what do I need? An MIT degree? What do I need? This is crazy. I just wanted something to eat. And then once they understand the process, they're like, wow, this is so easy. I can order online too and be out in 10 seconds. But then when you get like the 15 to 20-year-olds or 25-year-olds, they put their hand up at the greeter like, hey, I'm good. I'm good. I don't want to talk to you. I'm good. You know, they don't even want a hello. I'm good. And I can relate to that because I got 14 and 16-year-olds. They don't want to talk to me. You know, they'll text me before they talk to me. And that's just the world they live in. And why not create a restaurant that speaks to them?
So what's your favorite part of opening a new restaurant, Stratis?
The unknown.
The unknown.
The chance of failure. That's exciting. The chance that I got it wrong. You know, it's good. I mean, in my 20s and 30s. So I'll tell you, and I didn't even write this in my book, and I should have. In my 20s and 30s, my failure rate was higher than I should have been, but I owned 100% of everything. I owned 100%. I'd say around 46 after I hit my real lows with the breakup of Philippe Chow, I decided that I just want a piece of everything. But I want my partners that have the other pieces to be smarter than me. And I should have talked about that more in the book, because I'd rather have 30% of something that's great with people that are actually smarter than me, or have 100% of me knowing everything. So I've learned through years and maturity, and I hope I can help young kids, young entrepreneurs, don't make the mistake I did. Because if I had done this mentality in my 20s and 30s, yeah, again, it's not even about money anymore. It's just about it's about creating something from nothing and watch it grow. But I would have been more financially successful if I had taken smaller pieces, which is interesting. When they say you have 100% equity, you'll make more money. No. If you could take 30% and team up with 3 other people or 4 other people that are smarter than you, that 30% is worth more than 300%.
That's great. Yeah, well, that was actually one of the questions I was going to ask you. What were some of the surprising lessons you learned early on to kind of share with our younger entrepreneurs?
Yeah, it's all about, you know, I always tell my kids, you know, my erasers are bigger than the lead on my pencils. I make more mistakes than get it right. And that's part of the growing. You know, make your mistakes. Don't be afraid of failure. Don't be afraid of mistakes. You know what? Especially do it in your 20s before the kids and mortgages start. I mean, that's the right time to do it. If you're going to fail, do it. And when people say, "Oh, your advice, you know, whatever," I've never failed. Well, you know what? You probably never pushed yourself hard enough to get yourself to 1 or 2 failures. Because you know what? Oh, I'm worth $20 million, $30 million, and I never failed, and I'm 37. You know what? You could have been worth 300, because obviously you're putting numbers on it. You could have been worth 300 if you failed a couple of times, because that means you would have taken higher risk, and you wouldn't have been so conservative, and you would have pushed yourself. And guess what? When you push yourself, your risk for failure is higher, but your risk for reward can jump 10 times.
Yeah. So I've been excited about asking this next question for you.
You speak to my ex-wife?
I'm sorry?
You didn't speak to my ex-wife. Like, oh boy, I thought I was getting an ambush on that one.
That's great. No, this is actually this has to do with Arnold Schwarzenegger of all people. So I don't know if you've heard his speech, but the internet is pretty in love with it as well as I am. But in his speech, Plan B, he says that he hates Plan B and that it doesn't exist in his dictionary. What doesn't exist in your dictionary, either a phrase or word?
I've actually never heard that, and I actually I agree with it. I don't know what Plan B is. It's you go with Plan A, and if it doesn't work, you sit back and either fix it or just say it wasn't meant to work. To me, persistence. I mean, the key to success is not education; it's persistence. Like I write in my book, when when a door hits you and a door closes on you, you knock, doesn't open, you push, doesn't open, you push harder, it doesn't open, then kick it the fuck down. You take a sledgehammer and knock it out. Persistence. Don't take no. If you believe in what you're doing, and let me tell you, here's another rule: the more haters, the better. When you have haters, you know you're on the right track. When you have people saying, it would never work, there's not one great idea that's changed or revolutionized an industry that was looked at, face on, say, oh, that's a good idea. Yeah, that's a great idea. Let's do it. No, it's always looked at with people like, because you're changing something. People don't like to come out of their comfort zone. So for me, it's persistence. I've always been persistent. I've never taken, when I bought a shopping center when I was 19 years old. I put a suit on every day. I'd go to every bank, and they say, if your father cosigns, you're good. But I'm like, nope, I'm not having my father offered to cosign. It was a four-store shopping strip in Amityville, Long Island. I said, nope. I went to like 7 banks. They all knew my father. Your father cosigns, we're good. I can't give you that. I can't give you $600,000 in 1984. And I said, nope, I'm going to do it on my own. The 8th bank, I just happened to be walking down after I had a burger, and I see Columbia Federal Savings. I'm like, I never even heard of this bank. It was in Queens. So I walked in, I met the guy, and this was like a real part that I just threw it on the table. Like I knew the answer was no. And I'm just like, here it is. This is the pro forma. This is what we're doing. This is how much I'm buying it for. This is the amount of cash I'll put down, blah, 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 blah. And they approved my loan. And I had no relationship with the bank, but it was my 8th try before I got that $400,000 loan. And the best part is I basically jerked the owner. I stalled him out for like 6 months with like a $10,000 deposit. So I had to come up with $125,000 cash, which I didn't have. So that was the other 25% that I had to come up with. And at the closing, I said, Bart, I got good news and bad news. Here's a check for $400,000, but you need to hold a second mortgage on the 125 because I couldn't come up with the down payment. And he's like, you cursed me out, screaming, yelling. I'm just going, hey, let him get it all out, let it all. And guess what? He took an interest-only mortgage for 5 years on the 125, and I bought that. I bought a property before there was the no money down BS. I actually did it when that wasn't even a thing. So it's all about persistence. And I look back at how I was as a kid, and it's funny. I said to one of my friends, God, the things I did as a kid. I mean, I would never take no for an answer. I was so aggressive. And he's like, what's changed? You're the same way at 54. And it's kind of true, because I have more. If we're judging by financial, I have more than enough to be fine and the next generation or two. But it's not about money anymore. It's about me creating something from nothing and watch it flourish. It's like almost like having a child and watching it grow to something important.
Stratis, you are known for being on the forefront when adopting new technologies like Brooklyn Dumpling House. Why is this so important to you?
I love how you say Brooklyn Dumpling House, because I've trademarked that too. Brooklyn
Oh, have you?
Yeah, because everybody does the hybrid of Brooklyn Chop House and Brooklyn Dumpling Shop. Say it again. I'm sorry.
No, so what? You are known for being on the forefront when adopting new technologies like Brooklyn Dumpling. Why is this so important?
Because we're really changing the game. And when you can tell me that I'm way ahead of McDonald's and Starbucks. I just met with the chief development officer of Starbucks worldwide, and her name is Beatrice. They're opening one that we had lunch. She was picking my brain on how to implement something, get rid of their cashiers. And I'm like, at the end of the day, she asked me for what we patented with Panasonic, and she's asking me for can I send her some kind of info on it? I said, yeah, once you consult, hire me as a consultant. You guys got a lot of money. I'm not telling you what I've worked so hard at, and it was funny. She didn't expect that answer. She just thought, oh, I'm Starbucks and you're going to tell me how to do it. And no, so I'm getting calls like that. I'm getting calls from HMS hosts that have 5,000 restaurants at all the airports. And they're trying to figure out how the hell did we do this, where we've got our payroll under 20%. And what's great about it is at the same conference, the head of McDonald's was saying, we're embracing technology. We have all the self-ordering kiosks. And I was a real jerk. I got up and I said, that's my fax machine. Your self-ordering kiosks in 2 or 3 years, a fax machine. Your self-ordering kiosk, the number one competition that you have is a 10-cent Xerox copy of a QR code. Imagine if I got to spend $10,000 for hardware of a self-ordering kiosk, or I can go get a QR code for $50 one-time investment and print it on a Xerox copy and put a frame around it to make it look fancy. So the combination of, can you imagine if I'm in the business where I own something that I sell for $10,000, but the competition can do it for $50.10? That's a problem. So McDonald's, if you're telling me you're embracing technology because you have self-ordering kiosks, well, you know what? We're reducing our self-ordering kiosks because guess what? The consumer already bought the self-ordering kiosk, and it's called a smartphone.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't know how to answer that because they're so late to the game. I always said I wish I could run one of these companies, but again, I can't work for anyone else, so that's why I would never have. Yeah. They're just stuffed shirts, and they have so much red tape they can't even breathe. Like if they come up with a good idea, it might take 3 to 5 years to implement. Remember, Starbucks bought Eatsa. Eatsa was the first automat that came out that had some kind of traction. They paid $30 million for it. They closed the 5 stores down, and I thought Howard Schultz was finally going to get it right and implement the automat, and that was right before me. And mine was already in blueprints, and thank God he didn't do it. Again, he's got it for 5 years now, and he still hasn't done it. I mean, I walk into a Starbucks and I see 7 cashiers, I cringe.
Yeah.
First of all, I don't want to speak to them. And I don't want you to tell me for a pumpkin latte. I know what I've been drinking for 30 years. You're not going to change.
So you talk a lot about legacy in your book, most notably with your grandfather and your father. What does legacy mean to you, and what legacy are you hoping to leave behind?
That's all we got, right? After about 4,000 weeks, if we live to 90, it's all we got. It's all we got. It's all we have to leave. And at the end of my book, read the last chapter, read the last paragraph. It's basically, I'll paraphrase, is that, my grandfather had no shoes. My father played soccer with no shoes until 10 years old in the war-torn Sparta Mountains during Nazi-occupied Greece. He got his first pair of shoes at 15. And, I drive a Porsche. My daughter drives a Mercedes. And my grandkids will drive a Ferrari. It's a metaphor.
Mm-hmm.
But my great-grandkids will be shoeless again. And basically, why would you say that about your great-grandkids? Because it's about strength. Strength creates easy times. Easy times create weak men or women. And this book has been dedicated to the future generations of Morfogen families. We're Spartans, but be business warriors. Be warriors in life. Because you know what? If you become complacent, and because of the previous generations worked so hard to give you a better life, and that makes your life easy, well, that makes you weak. And with that, you will be shoeless again.
That's I love that. That's an awesome analogy, Stratis. And you are, one last thing, nominated for the Innovation Award this year. Congratulations. What does that mean to you?
It means it's better than money. It's not, to me, it's not about money anymore. It's about, I want to create a legacy where I've disrupted an industry that's been stale for years. And I got to tell you, an industry that has part of the smartest minds in business. Fast food is a major industry with a lot of smart people. And, and a lot of the guys or women that I'm competing with have MIT degrees and, chemistry and engineering degrees. And guess what? They're you know, I'm kind of humbled by it. I think it's awesome. I love it. I love it because remember, um, even during the .com days, I went after all the Wharton like MBAs, you know, during .coms in the 90s when I took the Fulton Fish Market onto the internet. They all called me crazy and da 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 da. And, you know, I would walk in just to like, you know, look down on them. I'd go into a board meeting where they're all MBAs and I wear shorts on. You know, that was, no, again, I wouldn't do that today, but that was the 30-year-old Stratis going like this. You know, you don't impress me with your MBAs. What impresses me is not your $2,000 suit. What impresses me is what you're bringing to the table here. You know, take your degree stays on the wall. It doesn't come to the table. It stays on the wall. Let it stay there. I've always fought these MBA types, and I've never been intimidated by them. And remember, and my wife is MIT Georgetown. So let me tell you something. You should see the wars that we have. When I met my father for the first time, like 15 years ago, he's like an Oxford graduate. He's an industrialist in Portugal. And there's my wife who just finished MIT Georgetown, you know, boarding schools. And here I am, Garden City High School, you know, public school. So when I go to meet him and he turns around, you know, old, you know, ascots and all that. Meet my fiance, grandfather. Da, da, da. Oh, very nice to meet you. Education, high school, Garden City, public. He looks at my fiance at the time and goes, and he walked away. So here's the fun part of the story. He was so disappointed that I didn't have an education. So fast forward 15 years, New Yorker magazine gives me my own cartoon. Now I know he reads New Yorker religiously. You know, that's just like the high intellect audience reads the New Yorker magazine. So not everybody gets their own cartoon. And all I get a call that, you know, grandson, the guy wanted to disown me for 15 years. And he's like, I'm very proud. And he actually framed it and put it in his office wall. Now he's 99 years old. So putting that aside, you know, it's funny how how everyone views success differently. A damn cartoon in someone's mind, to them, that's success. To me, is changing the game and watching something grow from nothing is my success. And I don't put a dollar figure on it anymore because sometimes dollar figures really don't tell the accurate picture.
Well, you've definitely done that, and congratulations again for the self-service innovation award. We're, you know, wishing you and your team best of luck. We're excited to see what the results are in just a short month from now. Thank you again for joining us today. We hope you enjoyed our deep dive into the world of restaurant technology, including the automat. That's all for today's episode. See you next time on Be Our Guest with your hosts, Jen Cameron and Sonya Maroney. Thanks, Stratis.
Thanks for having me.